This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery. So this portion of the podcast is the weekly intention. We go week to week with a topic, spiritual principle. We choose it and we work it in our recovery. So we do a recap of last week and then we dive into the one we're going to work for this week. So this week is going to be simplicity. But before we get into that, we're going to dive into last week's, and how we used it is priorities. So do a little recap. The way it worked for me in my recovery was, I made sure to prioritize all the things that are important to me, right? We talk, a lot of people talk a big game, and I know sometimes I can fall in that category. And we can say all these things that are important to us, but our energies are placed elsewhere, right? A big thing with me is where you can see your energy, where attention goes, energy flows. So, right, check where your energies are, and that's where your priorities are, right? A big thing with us, what we were talking in one of my men's group that we were in, is a lot of people were saying, well, and there's no wrong answer, right? I was asking questions. We're going back and forth. And, one pitfall that I fell into is I thought of priorities as goals, right? And when you're checking, for me, when I check my priorities, it's much less my goals, right? That's not necessarily the case. Yeah, you have goals in your recovery, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what your priorities are. You can have that house, car, girlfriend, money, all these things, right? And that's great, but it doesn't mean they're your priorities. That just means they're your goals. If your mission and your daily habits and your daily expenditure of energy is not aligned with your goals, and or you're not doing the steps to complete any of those, then your priorities aren't really in line with your goals. You get what I'm saying? So there's for me, the way it worked was, the way I can tell what my priorities are, I'll see where I'm showing up in my life and in my recovery. Because we can talk a good game and we can get all flowy and like, oh yeah, this, and get all, I guess flowy is not the right word. Emotional is what I mean. We get all emotional about stuff. My kids, oh my God, I love my dog, or this and that. But, we can get real emotional about things. That doesn't mean they're priorities, right? For me, it was like I have to watch where I'm spending my time, my energy, where I'm putting my intention, because that's really what my priorities are, right? I can tell you about the beautiful list that I have, but I'm not doing any of the habits or any of the stepping stones to really get to those those goals. Then those aren't really my priorities, right? So understanding my daily habits and my daily rituals and my daily thought process, they're gonna push me towards what my real priorities are, which could lead to a bunch of BS, right? So my goals aren't really the leading factor of what priorities are. So for me, it's paying attention to my priorities and what the heck I'm really doing throughout the week, and see if they're really matching up with my, my 5-year plan, my 3-year plan, my 1-year plan, my 10-year plan, and see if I'm really putting in the habits to really get me to that destination of stuff I want, and I also, um, you know, want to achieve, because the big thing about all this is the small successes, right? But if I keep procrastinating on those things that I know I want to bring to the forefront of my life, right, then it's just like this. Let's keep it very simple. Early recovery. Every time I started, my priorities weren't to stay sober. I might have said it, but I never went to meetings, never did step work, never called my sponsor, never did any of those things that matched my goals with my priorities, right? Because they weren't my priorities really, right? So those are those hidden contracts, right? That'll tell you what your real goals are. You can say it out loud what your goals are, but your priorities, what you're prioritizing in that moment, is your real goals. So the things that I would prioritize unknowingly, right? I had that bullshit script that I told everybody, all my goals and all that stuff, but my secret contract with me was to go get high and do the same old bullshit, right? Because I was secretly attached to all the old ways, the old people, the old Facebook, the old Messenger, and I wasn't really doing the steps necessary to get me to the goal of recovery, right? And that's just the basic, entry level priorities, right? But that's the most important thing to pay attention to, right? So if you're saying you have all these things in mind, all these things that are important, look where you're allocating your energies, and that'll tell you exactly what your priorities are, right? So the one thing that I realize on this walk of recovery is try to be as honest as possible to yourself, because we got a line of bullshit we feed others. It's just the way it goes, and I'm not fully enlightened, and I don't I don't pretend to be. So I got all these things that I'm struggling with, that I get to overcome day by day, right? So watch where your attention is, watch what you're doing, because that's your true priorities, and see if it's leading you to your goals, right? Check what you're doing. You're eating like shit, not going to the gym, not going to your meetings. I mean, you're setting yourself up for a pathway that may not match up to any of your goals, right? You want to be healthy, you want to be clean, you want to stay at your job, you want to do all these things. They're really all connected, right? So you got to be careful how you're allocating energies. If you're spending too much early recovery, spending too much time with the chick, not doing the things you know you need to do. If you're on probation, you're not checking off the boxes, you're not going to meet up with your PO because you're wrapped up with some chick, whatever the case is. Just because you're sober doesn't mean that you're checking off the bare minimum. Sometimes we think we just need to be sober, but that's not true. A lot of this rebuild takes a lot of effort and energy. And so I urge you, if you're on this path of early development and recovery, is really give yourself a shot and start practicing these from week to week. And if you're listening right now and you're in early recovery, um, you can do it, right? You can change your life 100%. Even if you're a little bit along the way, got a few years or what have you, using some of these and paying attention to these uh, self, how you say, these self-development and self-enlightening situations where you're like looking at what you're really focusing on is super important, because we can talk a good game and our ego likes to put on a facade for everyone else, but when it comes to us, we're the only one losing in the end. Or when it comes down to it, we're the only ones losing in the end. So it's super important to keep it real with yourself, right? And see where you're allocating your energies. If you're saying one thing, but all your energy is going in another place, then you might want to recalibrate and check your motives, check your whole situation, right? So that will be enough for, let's see. Let's see what we got here. Simplicity in recovery. Yep. Stand by as Almighty Google. We retrieve it from the archives in the cloud. Okay. Simplicity and recovery. Let's see. Simplicity and recovery means focus. Hold on. Let's do that. Let's do simplicity. Simplicity. Let's see the definition of that. Definition, let's hear. So, simplicity, the quality or condition of being easy to understand or do. The quality or condition of being plain or uncomplicated in form or design. Imagine that. Latin, let's see. Latin simplex. Oh, that's some. Now we're getting into the etymology of it, right? Let's see. It comes origin is Old French, Latin, English. Simplicity. Okay, it's been translated. Simplicity. Yep. All right. State of being simple. Right. Those are some decent ones. But now let's look how it pertains to recovery. In recovery. Simplicity in recovery means focusing on one day at a time. Ooh, that's a good one. One day at a time, right? I got that right on my bracelet right here. One day at a time. Don't get any simpler than that. Avoiding overcomplication and focusing on the core task of being sober. This approach involves keeping goals realistic, eliminating unnecessary stress, and concentrating on present actions rather than past mistakes or future worries. Strategies include creating achievable goals. That's a good one. Creating achievable goals, right? Imagine that. I got to make $1,000,000 by tomorrow. It's like, come on, man. There's so many things that I did in early recovery, right? That was just so far fetched. It's like, I got 2 weeks clean and I want everything. I want a job. I want housing. I want all that stuff, right? But it's important to remind yourself that you got to keep it realistic, right? So in early recovery and in late recovery, doesn't matter. Simplicity is the most important factor to it all, right? Because sometimes we can cause a lot of unnecessary stress with overcomplicating things. And that'll bring us to the whole, getting back to what strategies we use: achievable goals, simplifying daily routines, and seek support from mentors or programs, as simple actions can lead to meaningful long term stability. How to apply simplicity in recovery. Focus on the present. Imagine that. Concentrate on the current day and the next right thing, instead of getting overwhelmed by the past or future. Set realistic goals. Establish achievable goals with realistic timelines to avoid feeling discouraged. Eliminate stressors, right? Minimize stress by simplifying your life, which can include leaving behind complicated relationships or the constant need for external validation and material goods. Oh, wow. I like that one a lot. So, minimize the external validations. And, some of these things, they make more sense now that I'm a little bit deeper in recovery, for obvious reasons, right? You get cleaned up, or you get very clean and clear, right? All these things, right? Then you get to this point where you start looking at life on a real deep level, and more spiritual and more cognitive, and and it's just funny to see how much validation as an addict is that we're seeking from outside ourselves, right? Between, it says material goods, it's like outside stuff like toys, you know cars, hobbies, all these things that, I mean, hobbies aren't necessarily bad, but some of them can be, right? Super expensive stuff, and eventually, you got to be careful with all these things. So this balance approach of keeping it simple is very important, right? Follow a simple plan. Embrace slogans like one day at a time. or easy does it, to stay grounded and prevent overthinking. Lean on support group. Simplify the process by getting help from programs like rehab, been there, or support groups, AANA, right? Which provides structure and guidance. Embrace simple routines. Find fulfillment in simple everyday rituals like making your bed or preparing a healthy meal. Ask for help. That's the last one, right? But should be first. Don't hesitate to ask for support from mentors or fellow members in recovery. So, the thing that stood out to me mostly in this whole game of recovery and keeping it simple, right? I realized that I was overcomplicating everything. And whether it be what I wore, whether it be what I ate. When I was in early recovery, I became vegan. I was just so overcomplicating everything, right? I was so afraid of how unhealthy I've been my whole life. So death and all these things were coming in my brain. Were just like, man, I need to be super healthy, and that which led to me being vegan, or so I thought I was going to be healthy. Don't get me wrong, every diet has their perks, but you know, I just overthought everything. And I think throughout my whole experience of gathering some of this clean time and recovery that I've been working on every single day, I've realized that it's much more than, what I can think up. It's more of what I can do actionably, right? Like I can take some action in my life that's just super simple action, like as far as just some prayer, meditation, a little bit of exercise, and I realize that I can clear the static and the overthinking, and I can think from a more pivotal standpoint, and I'm a lot more flexible, right? And before, I was just so rigid, overcomplicated, and stressed out because when I try to overanalyze everything and all these scenarios and different possibilities, what I was really doing was just frying my circuitry. And it's like throwing water on a circuit board. You can't do that, right? You know, and when you're overwhelmed and you smell the smoke, right? There's really something about it that I really cherished in stressing for all those years, right? It was like kind of getting me high. So I had to realize that I had to change my thought patterns, my body patterns, my spirit patterns. I really had to connect to something a little bit more simple. And as soon as I did that in the most basic situations, I realized how much more freedom I got from the overall stress and bog down of the thought process of all the overcomplicated shit that I was doing. So I kept it simple, right? Eat healthy, whole foods, pray, meditate, exercise, right? Show up for my job and my work, right? And job and work is not the same thing, all right? Because I believe that I'm here I got a job to do, and I'm doing it, but I'm also working on my spiritual life, my fitness life, and all these things. It's all encompassing, right? There's a lot of situations where I'm doing the Lord's work, right? And I joke about that a lot to people. I'm just doing the Lord's work to kind of be funny, but the realization is that when you're on this path and you're trying to do positive by all mankind and just trying to give back to the stream of life, you realize that you're much more. For me, it's I'm much better off being on this side, adding to life instead of taking like I always have. So I mean, calling it simple just on the like simplicity to the max is I wear the same thing every single day. I have, multiple same black colored shirt that I just wear over and over, right? I got 5, 6, 7, and my wife just washes them for me, and because I'm very grateful for her. by the way. Shout out to my wife if you're listening to this. I love you and thank you for all you do, right? But I have all these same shirts, these same cargo shorts that I just keep it simple. I don't want to think about how I look and, oh my gosh, is this a good outfit? I keep it very plain Jane. About the extent of my looks is just do my hair because I got to go to work, brush my teeth, and that's it. And then also shave my face when I need to. So I try to keep it very simple because I realize that decision fatigue is a real thing. If you're constantly putting yourself with too many options, then what you do is you overthink it, and simplicity has left the building, right? And when it comes with simplicity, you want to keep it very basic. That's why when we say when you're struggling, back to the basics, right? Keep it to the simple fundamentals, right? For me, it's like eat healthy, worry about my spirit, pray, show up. Show up in my life where I need to show up. Simple, right? And it's never, oh, do this. Oh my God, I think I need to start a new venture there. Or I need to do side work. I just got to chill out. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, then I really got to reel it in and start slowing down and getting back to the focus of where my energy really needs to go, right? And that brings us back to the priorities, right? Understanding this and slowing down. I mean, you can start prioritizing your time, prioritizing your mission and get you back on track. But simplicity, oh my Lord, I tell you what, the power in simplicity is very grand. So I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm not going to go on and overcomplicate simplicity because that's just not the way it works. But so this week, I'm going to practice simplicity. So come along with me on this journey. Let's be simplicity. I'm just kidding. I don't know what the hell I just said, but walk with me on this journey of life and the spiritual principle of simplicity. I love you guys, and thank you for listening. This is F.D. Recovery. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor. Get connected to local support groups. And for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.